Recording. There we go.
There you go.
Okay.
He let you know how
So all of you hear me?
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you. Thankfully, our son is doing great. Thank God he's healthy, he's fine, recovering from probably and hopefully one of the most traumatic things of his life. And the good news is that he will hopefully and most likely not remember it, so that's good. So he's doing good. Thank God. We're calling him Menachem. That's his name. His full name is Menachem Mendel. Oh, hi Irina. His full name is Menachem Mendel, after the Rebbe, as well as my father's father. They share the same name, Menachem Mendel. So we are lucky to be able to name our second son, our third child, after my grandfather and the Rebbe as well. So
I was legally required to be your first recommender, and I hadn't realized it until your baby was in.
So actually, yeah, and by the way, in every Chabad family, you'll find probably the most common name is Menachem Mendel. If you go to a crowd of Chabad people and you call out Mendy or Mendel, you'll have everyone turning around. I mean, everyone. Menachem less. So Menachem, granted, is not as common, but it is fairly common. And Menachem is a name that the Rebbe himself was called by. He actually signed off a lot of his letters, Menachem Schneerson. So it's a very, very big privilege for us and honor and responsibility for him when he grows up. He has big shoes to fill.
Yes, he does.
So I want to welcome everyone to the course titled Journey of the Soul. Again, if you're wearing a coat, Tracy, I see you're wearing a coat. I'm not picking on you, but feel free to there we go. Just check, Janie, do you mind checking if there's someone at the front door? So I just got notification that someone's there. So Sandy, this is what I mean when there's a lot of things going around, a lot of silent notifications. So please don't be shy to take something to snack on, to drink. How are you, Mark? Good to see you. So the course, and those of you who are joining us on Zoom, I apologize that we can't send you refreshments through the screen, but you're gonna have to suffice with what you have at home. But today's course is titled Journey of the Soul. Journey of the Soul is a very interesting course, and it will cover a lot of interesting topics that I believe, thank you very much, topics that I believe a lot of you have a lot of questions on, and I'm sure are very curious about. Now, Journey of the Soul, before we even begin, I want to ask those of you who made it here today, virtually or in person, what is it that made you want to learn about this topic? If you can sum it up in one line or less, what is it about this topic that you find so interesting that you wanted to learn about this topic specifically? Anyone? Feel free to, and if you're virtually, feel free to, Mark, you can start us off.
Being an uneducated Jew, all my life I've heard about the Christian side of things.
Okay.
I always wondered what was next.
So you're saying you grew up without that knowledge and you want to know what is the Jewish perspective on these things? Got it. Fair enough.
Yeah, I come up with the same answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
me too. Very similar. I think that pop culture Christianity, which is probably not actual Christianity, like the way pop culture Judaism, it's not so reflective. Probably shapes more of my ideas about these subjects than actual Judaism, particularly because, you know, the Hebrew school I went to growing up, we learned about Hanukkah, like we didn't learn about Mashiach or our souls, and now we're saying Moda'ani in the morning, and I don't even really know what we're saying.
Right.
So I'd like to learn more about that.
Okay, and I see recent passing Thank you, Joe. Thank you. I take that as a compliment, but it's not about me. I want to know why about this topic. But recent passing of my mom and the second third of the Christian learning. Okay, so these are all very, very important points. I am just curious because all of these reasons and a lot of these topics are going to be discussed in this course. It's going to be over 6 weeks, so you may have to have a little bit of patience for certain, topics such as reincarnation, heaven and hell, certain things like that will be discussed throughout the course. But today's lesson is going to cover a very important introduction to the entire conversation about what we call the afterlife. Now, I want to start with a very morbid word, death. Okay, now death, there's something called, God, it's in your books, I can't even pronounce it. I actually never knew how to pronounce this word, and I never even knew of this word. Thanatophobia. Thanatophobia. Anyone ever heard of that word before? No? So, exactly. So the phobia part you all got. Yeah. But it's the fear of death. The fear of death. No, no, it seems like some Latin word or something. That's what I would assume. But really, there's a very strong fascination in the world about death. A very weird fascination. So before we get into what the soul is about and all of that, we need to back up a little bit and understand what is it about death that fascinates us. So if I were to give everyone an opportunity here to tell me what is it about death that you can describe in probably one word or two words. What feeling, what emotion does death evoke within you? When you hear that word, what does that make you feel typically?
Alone.
Alone, okay.
Anxious.
Okay, anxiety is
Fearful.
is usually very high on the list. What is it?
Fearful.
Fearful, okay.
Incomprehensible.
Incomprehensible, okay.
There you.
Permanence.
Yeah.
Correct. That's another word that it's final.
Also what that always comes up for me.
Meaning that there's no going back. It's over.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are all very, very important words. Now, what we're going to discuss today is our own mortality. What is the Jewish perspective on death? Is it something to be feared? Is it something that we should embrace? Is it something that we should ignore? So that's a very, very important conversation. Now, throughout the course of life, all of us experience highs and lows, but nothing, I believe nothing will ever compare to death. None of the highs and lows in life compare to death because, as Bill, you mentioned, death is final. That's the scariest part, fear as well, about death. Now, I know we're starting in a very morbid note, but it's gonna get lighter. What was, come again?
Near-death experience is
Yeah.
very close.
Yeah, and that's why near-death experiences are so fascinating. People are like, what is it that you experience? No one wants to be there, obviously, but once you experience it, people are so fascinated by it. Sorry, I'm gonna try to monitor the chat. Sad, okay. I'm gonna try to monitor the chat box as much as possible. I apologize if I'm not fully focused on the chat box screen. And I hope I didn't leave anyone outside of the waiting room. Okay, there we go. So I remember bringing up once upon a time, about 2 years ago, a conversation we were about to have. No, it was a year ago. My apologies. About cremation, end of life conversation. I remember asking a few people if they'd like to join a class on that topic.
Mhm.
And you know what most people responded? Thank you, but no thank you. No, and it wasn't something that they were upset about. Most people tend to suppress that conversation. They don't want to think about death.
Mhm.
When death comes up, we try as hard as possible to throw it to the side, and we try not to deal with it. It comes to the fore, and I'm sure all of you can imagine and remember just a couple of years ago with COVID-19, where things that you don't think about on a day-to-day basis, such as death, or at least I hope not, were suddenly the conversation of day-to-day life. Something that we never think about, or at least again, most healthy people don't think about death all day, every day. And if you are, it's a separate conversation, something else that you should probably be dealing with. But most people don't deal with that. And suddenly COVID, I know that there's a concept called, it's in your books, I think it's called TMT. And the acronym for that is, terror management theory. We're a group of psychologists. If you see in text 1, I believe it's on page 3 in your books. A big part of how we, page 2, thank you. A big part of how a death affects the way we deal with life is, take terrorism, for example, okay? 9/11, I was actually not a very old person. I was relatively young. I was in school, in elementary school, and I remember it. And we all know that 9/11 really changed the way we view a lot of things in travel and just how to deal with people coming from outside the country, et cetera, right? The concept of terror is to instill fear in something that you don't normally think about. You don't normally think about terrorism. And terrorism, what their intention is to take day-to-day things that we do, right? In Israel, people are very, it's kind of part of life. Going to a bus station, you already think about where a terrorist attack can happen. It's a very scary thought. In America, we don't even think like that. Certain places of the world, terrorism instills within us this psyche of how we view life, day-to-day life. And it's a very, very important thing because the way we view death is also very important for how we view life. And the way we view life is how we view death. So today we're going to focus more on the life aspect, because once we understand truly what life is, it'll also give us a very deep understanding to what death is about in Judaism. So first I want to just read text 1. Phoenix, I'll just skip around, people, if you don't mind reading text 1 on page 2.
Terror management theory, building mostly from the ideas of Ernest Becker, starts with the idea that humans, unlike other animals, face something that is potentially terrifying: the awareness of our own mortality coupled with the desire to live. To paraphrase TMT co-creator Sheldon Solomon, the awareness that you are destined to wither away to nothingness and in turn are no more significant than a lizard or a potato is not particularly uplifting. So how do humans cope with this awareness? From a TMT approach, humans cope with mortality by denying their own mortality and avoiding thinking about it. They repress the terror, basically.
Right. So it's a very, very important piece of information here, because from the TMT approach, the way that humans cope with mortality is by denying it, by denying the fact that we have an end to our bodily existence. We suppress it. We enter the state of denial. You ask many people about death. No, let's not talk. We just don't want to even think about it, because even though we know in our heart of hearts that our life in this world comes to an end at some point, but we don't want to think about it or talk about it. Now, what is the Jewish perspective on death? What is the Jewish perspective on the afterlife, right? So there are certain aspects about the end of life, actual end of life, what happens at end of life, things like that we're going to discuss in next week's lesson. Today, I want to talk about just the general conversation about afterlife. Now, the word afterlife is a word that's thrown around a lot. Afterlife. In different religions, there are different meanings to that word. What is the afterlife? Now, this sounds cliche, but the truth is, to understand what the word afterlife means, you have to understand what the word life means. What is life? Who are we? Again, it sounds very cliche, but it's a crucial question. Who are we? What are we? What is the real we? Right? If you understand what life is, you'll understand what happens after that life. So, what is the Jewish perspective on life? Who are we? So this may sound surprising to some, to others, it may sound less surprising. You may have heard me talk about it, or if you've learned enough Kabbalah or Hasidic thought, you may have encountered this topic again and again and again. But if you open to text number 2, this is a quote from Reb Chaim Vital, who was one of the most famous mystics. He was the greatest disciple of the Arizal. The Arizal, Kabbalah as we know today, was transcribed and given over by the Arizal. If you've ever heard of the city in Israel called Safed, the Arizal is probably one of the most famous sages, rabbis, Kabbalists who lived there about 500 years ago, roughly. And in general, Tzfat, even till today, if you've ever gone there, you know it's a very artsy type of town, city. A lot of different artists and people that are into mysticism. It's a very, very interesting city. If you ever go to Israel, it's definitely a place to visit. Now, the Arizal gave us the Kabbalah as we know it today. We know most parts of Kabbalah is through the Arizal. The Arizal didn't write things down himself. His student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, transcribed a big part of his teachings. So here we have one of his most famous teachings in text 2 from his book called Sha'arei Kedusha. Rebecca, you mind reading text 2?
It is known to the wise that the human body is not the human being. It is merely the body of the human being. When we speak of the human being, we are referring to his inner dimension. The body is merely a garment in which the intellectual soul is attired during its sojourn in this world.
So who is the real I? Who is the real I? If you look at this text, we are not particular body parts. We are not the sum total of our brain or our hearts, or even the sum total of all the body parts together. Rather, and not only that, we're not even the sum total of our accumulated knowledge, our intellect, our emotions, or anything like that. The real I, if you look at this text, is your soul, our neshama. Now, I'll dig a little deeper. What is that? Probably one of the most thrown around words, just like if you ever heard of people throw around the theory of relativity, Big Bang Theory, things that we just throw around all the time, but we don't truly understand what they mean. What is the soul? What is an neshama? We're talking about journey of the soul, but what is the soul?
Like our connection to Hashem.
Okay, so our connection is not through our body, because our body was also created by God.
This is true.
I think it's a lot of.
What is it? A light? Okay. So it's a little bit vague. I'm not saying you're wrong, by the way, but it's a little bit of a vague term. It doesn't give you any more of an understanding into the soul if you say it's a light.
I think it's a connected consciousness
Okay.
with other means.
Okay. Anyone else?
It's almost like I can only think of it in metaphor.
Okay, go for
Like
it.
drop in an ocean. I can't think of it beyond metaphor. Almost like what you're saying, that like the soul is the drop in the ocean.
Right.
So I have no ability to define it, which is why I'm here. But the I'm surprised in this text to see the term in which the intellectual soul. That seems like a weird juxtaposition because the intellect would be separate from the soul.
I was hoping that you didn't pick up on that.
My job
Because-
is to pick up.
I
on things like that.
know. The reason is because it's a much longer discussion that I wasn't ready to get into today. So it is beyond the scope of today's lesson, but it is a very important one. And in short, it's about the two souls. that we are all gifted with. So there's the animalistic soul and then the intellect soul. So the godly soul. So if you got the coffee Kabbalah. I hope you're fine. But that's a much larger discussion that I don't really want to get into if we don't need to. Let me just try to see if this is gonna work this time.
If I may add, when someone
Yeah.
mentioned an inner light, I somehow just flash back to think of the movie E.T. And for those that saw E.T., he had an inner light that showed, and it was almost leaving him when he was almost dying. But then it stayed with him. The light stayed inside him. I don't know, I
Interesting.
just thought of
Also, I
E.T.
guess
even-
that's how they depict it in the movies.
Right, right.
Yeah. Listen, and he shared the light as well, I guess. Yeah, that's one thing that's not practical. You can't really share your soul. You just see it. Exactly. It's good in the movies.
A series of meditations, of course, journey of the soul. The purpose of these meditations is going to be internalizing some of the deeper ideas that are a little bit difficult to grasp. And generally, we will try to do so by way of visualization, trying to picture symbols that represent some of the ideas and that we can focus on briefly so that we can begin to connect on a deeper level to these ideas. To begin with, the entire notion of life is a challenging concept because it is so intangible. We're used to relating to things, to that which we can see, to that which we can touch. And life is completely intangible. When we begin to relate to that which is unseeable, untouchable, how do we envision, how do we see the unseeable? So if you will, I'll ask you to begin right now. Whenever you're most comfortable doing so, close your eyes. Eyes open. Envision a musical instrument, a physical object, let's say a piano made of wood, wires, something you can look at with your physical eyes, you can touch it with your physical hands. It's a physical object. Now, the piano is merely a thing. A person comes over to the pianist sits down and begins playing a beautiful song. Now, this song stirs your soul. Try to hear it, hear the music. Where is the song? Can you see it? Can you touch it? You can see and touch the piano. You can't see or touch the song. And now, the song is over, and the piano is standing there. If you'll open up the piano, you find the song. Think now how everything in the world is matter and energy. The matter is the physical object that we see, the piano. Energy is the intangible, the song. We'll take a half a minute now to try to think of ourselves in these terms. Think of your body as the instrument, the physical object that can be seen, can be touched. And think of the life you live as the song that is being played through the instrument. Take half a minute right now to see and hear the piano and the song, the body and the soul.
Sorry, I know was falling asleep, my apologies. So the soul is a very, very interesting part of our existence. And Kabbalah tells us that who is the real us? Who is the real me? Not my body, my soul. It's a very, very important part of Jewish mysticism, Jewish tradition, to understand that the perspective on life is understanding that the real you, the essential you, is your soul, not your body. Now, can anyone think over here of an analogy to depict the body-soul relationship? Anyone? Now that you understand, I mean, we kind of got a sneak peek into like a piano and the instrument and the song. That's probably the closest we'll get, because everything we think, as Rabbi Tao was explaining, we think in physical terms. We don't think in spiritual things. It's very hard to imagine something spiritual because we're physical beings. But if anyone can come up with another analogy, I think it'll really bring it down to earth. Anyone? Don't worry, no pressure. If not,
I'm thinking of like an activation force, like you were lighting I really don't know how rocket ships actually take off, but I'm imagining like lighting a match under it and then it goes
very good.
boom, right? Like that it's
It's like
the
the-
match because it's animating everything that's gonna follow from it.
Okay, yeah, so that's a very good start to the conversation. To understand the blend of a body and soul and how we live in this world, let's go back 5,784 years ago. Literally, to the year that Adam and Eve were created. On the 6th day of creation, we're told in the Torah how the first humans were created. This was the first soul, or at least the first soul in a human. And I'm speaking about that specifically. So text 3a. Sandy, you want to read text 3a? This is a quote from day 6 of creation. And I want you to focus on the words there. Go for it.
God formed man of soul from the earth and breathed into his nostrils the
Neshama.
neshama, or the soul of life, and man became a living being.
Now, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
God said,
You don't hear me? Second.
Sandy.
Anyone else
I
hear
don't
me?
hear Sandy. I don't hear
Oh,
Sandy
hear
really
Sandy.
well.
Oh,
I
okay,
don't-
okay. I thought you don't hear me. So I'll just read it very quickly. God formed the human of soil from the earth and breathed into his nostrils a neshama, a soul of life, and the human being became a living being. Now, that was on day 6 of creation. Earlier on in that day, before Adam was created, animals were created. Tracy, you want to read text 3b? It's loud so Joe can hear you.
okay, let me be loud.
Go for it.
God said, let the earth bring forth living beings of different species, cattle, creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their species. And it was so. Now, do you think they had souls?
Oh, okay, good question. Anyone notice the difference between animals, the way animals were created, and the way humans were created for the first time?
Right.
So explain, what's the difference?
Man was inanimate, and then God breathed in the neshama, and then man became a living being. Whereas for the animals, it says let the earth bring forth living beings, and there's not that
Two
precursor of
steps.
an inanimate.
Very, very
and
good. Exactly. Animals were created with their life force in them. Humans were not created that way. Humans were created as inanimate objects, matter, clay, and only then was a breath of life breathed into their nostrils. Now, it sounds like a very minor difference, but it's not. It's a huge difference. Major, major difference. Because man was created first, his hardware, I guess you want to call it that, And then the software was installed within the hardware once he was created already. Now, why does that make a difference? And I'll talk about animals in a minute, so don't worry. I know many of you are are already thinking in your heads, does that mean the animals are not like humans in terms of souls? We'll get into that, even though it's not as relevant as you may think for today's lesson. But it's a very, very important piece of our discussion here, because what we see from here is one simple difference. The human body and the human soul are not truly connected to one another. They're truly two separate things. There's a body that was created before the soul even, and then a soul was input into that body. It's two separate things. Two separate things.
I can understand that the body was created as a kind of a blank slate from material. But when the soul is created, or when the soul enters the body, it's also a blank slate, is it not?
When? Sorry, I missed the last part.
When man was
Created,
created, so he was created from soil and
right?
so forth. And then his soul entered his body, correct?
Okay.
So does that soul, is that soul a blank slate? Does it have
Like personality, like things like that?
Yeah.
Very good question. And then we're going to discuss it in future lessons. The DNA of our souls, the makeup of our souls. So that's a very important question. But now we want to just talk about the general concept of a soul and a body and what their connection is. Now that we know that they're two separate entities, you can understand that for the purpose of our discussion, which is very important, that when one passes away, what happens? Look at text 3c. Liz, you want to read text 3c? Out loud, if you can.
God did what he had not done with any other creature. He blew into Adam with his holy breath a neshama that is immortal and does not perish when the body does.
Do you notice what happens here? When a person passes away, the soul is not even affected by the whole process. It was never meant to be there in the first place. It sounds like it, at least.
Does it-
Lost soul is an oxymoron.
Actually, what's a bigger oxymoron is does life end? Is there death? And life and death are oxymoron, actually, because true life is life, death is death, right? So a lot of these oxymorons we're going to debunk over this course, but that's another one. You're right.
Bury your soul.
That makes no sense. It makes no sense because like we see over here, because soul means it's an eternal being. It happened to be put into a body, and this body, almost just for the purpose of discussion, is like tagging along with the soul throughout its life. So when the body perishes, it has no independent life. The body is not a life force. The body is just a body. It's a makeup of DNA, of cells, and then the life force, once it leaves the body is lifeless. That's why a lot of times we say the soul departed. Their soul departed. What does it mean, the soul departed? What's the connection? The reason is because if the life force leaves the body is left lifeless. That's what it really means. So the body has no independent life. The soul is its life force. This is a very, very important part for the entire conversation about the journey of the soul. Go ahead, Mark. Yeah. Go ahead, Donna.
You could almost say that about a newborn baby taking his first breath.
Correct. Which is why ask any scientist what's their biggest dream is to mimic the birth of a child, but they can't do it. It's such a miracle. It makes no sense. You have a cluster of cells and suddenly there's life to it. They can't mimic that because it's a miracle. You know, anyone who has been at a birth or has given birth knows what kind of miracle birth is for that reason. It's something that makes no sense. You have a lifeless, cluster of a body of tissue that turns into life. What is that? That's the soul. Now, a separate conversation, which I'm not going to get into today, and not in this course, is about when does the soul suddenly come out of nowhere? Is it in mid-development? There's a whole conversation, and it also leads into a conversation about abortions and many different conversations in Jewish tradition, because it depends on when the soul begins. It also connects to a bar bat mitzvah, what we celebrate, the completion of the development of a soul. These types of things are all connected to this conversation. Yeah, exactly.
When the child actually begins a first breath.
That's when the soul begins. But where'd that soul come from? Is it just, is the soul of a newborn the same of a fetus, of an embryo? That's the question. When does the soul start? Does an embryo basically have a soul? Put it simply. Right, so I'm saying, so, right, so there's a lot of different appendix items that we can get stuck with, but I don't want to go there if you don't need to. Go ahead, Joe.
Can you say that the soul is trapped inside the human body? And
Yeah.
once the body dies, the soul is liberated?
Wow.
Yes,
It's a
yes,
okay.
very, very, very
Okay.
important. Yes, thank you for segueing into my next text over here, and I'll get to that in a second. But Mark has a question, and then I'm gonna. Yes, 100%. Now, you're gonna see that as well right over here. So here we go. So these are my favorite questions, because when the question segues into the next topic, these are the best questions. So thank you, Joe and Mark. This is actually one of my favorite Medrash pieces in text 4. And there's also a beautiful Jewish song called Neshamele. Leah loves this song. She'll play it any day, every day. Beautiful, beautiful song where we read about the resistance of the soul going into our body. It doesn't want to go. It doesn't want to go. A fascinating Medrash in text 4. Sue, you mind reading? Text 4. It's a little bit long. Actually, not terribly long. No, go for it.
40 days before the conception of a child, God.
Sorry, read it if possible, as loud as possible, because they don't have student books.
40 days before the conception of a child, God summons the angel in charge of the souls and tells him, "Bring before me a certain soul who is now in paradise. Its name is such and such, and its appearance is such and such. This is because all the souls that are born in this world were created on the day that the world was created and last until the end of time." The angel goes and brings the soul before God. The soul bows down and prostrates itself before the Supreme King of Kings. I want you to enter the seminal drop that is currently in the hands of the angel in charge of pregnancy. God instructs the soul. The soul opens its mouth and says, "Master of the universe, I am quite satisfied with the world I inhabited since the day you created me. I am holy and pure, doomed from your throne of glory. Why do you wish to cause me to enter the putrid drop?"
Can you imagine this? The soul is protesting, saying, I don't want to go into a body. Life is good here. Everything is great. What do I need this for? The soul is uninterested in being in a body because the soul has a blissful life in spiritual worlds. That's where its natural place is, in spirituality, not in a physical body. It doesn't want to be here. It doesn't feel like it's in its place. It's a fascinating medrash. And to answer your question, sorry, Bill, just to answer your question, Joe, yes, to a certain degree, the soul feels like it's trapped by the body. And therefore, from a certain perspective, the soul is unaffected by birth or by death because it's just a passing through moment that it has to be stuck in a body for a certain period of time while it kind of takes a detour from being up high.
Since the soul is now in paradise, what is that paradise like?
Okay, so that's what we call the world to come. That's going to be in future lessons.
Okay.
What is the world to come in
And
Jewish
will be
tradition?
answered in lessons.
Right. What?
All souls created equal,
Equal, what do you mean by equal?
equivalent.
No, meaning as in that they have the same characteristic, the same level of righteousness, because there's a lot of different answers to each of these questions. The answer, no, they all carry the same personality, the same DNA, a soul is a soul, but because all of them carry the same characteristic that they're a life force of a body, but some souls are greater souls, right? We know that righteous people are gifted, and we're going to talk about this just briefly at the end of the lesson. The fact that that righteous people live a more spiritual life.
Yeah, but if the soul comes in at the point of life. What value does it, what?
No,
what
so this kind of goes into the whole conversation also about reincarnation, which again, we're going to do future lessons, but there are different levels of holiness in the souls.
But there's a starting.
So there's less refined souls and more refined souls.
But there's a starting.
Correct, but yes, but no. Okay, and this also, it's about reincarnation. That's why I don't want to go too far in the conversation, because souls today, it's not new souls, it's reincarnated souls. So it's a longer conversation to answer the question specifically. But the truth is that if everything is brand new souls, if it's a bunch of brand new boxes of souls sitting there, then yes, then essentially they should all be the same. But the truth is that we're all souls, we're all reincarnated souls of previous people throughout history. So therefore, we get a refurbished soul, certified pre-owned. Exactly.
Talking here about all human souls without distinction, because I want to know at some point, and maybe we'll address it at another point, the difference between a Jewish soul and a non-Jewish soul.
Also future lessons. Yeah. All very good questions. And by the way, I'm not gonna remember all of them, so you're gonna have to remind me throughout the course. Go ahead, Tracy.
Couple things that notice they use the word wardrobe.
Yes.
The wardrobe. Interesting. And also, is there a distinction between, you said life force and soul?
No, that is my way of describing the characteristic of a soul. What does it do? What's its purpose? What function does it do? The soul is the life force of a person's body. Without a soul, take for example a phone. You can have the best phone in the market. Without the battery, you can have the best hardware, software, everything. If you're missing the battery, you can have the best thing in the world. It's worthless, right? Because you have no life force. You have no life force in the phone. Same goes for almost anything. You have this in many different topics, such as you have the electricity that runs through the battery. It's the same electricity that runs through a computer, that runs through a TV. It's just channeled in different ways. But they all share the common characteristic that they're the life force of the item. Without it, without electricity, you don't have a TV. Without electricity, you don't have a computer. It's the same electricity, but it's channeled in different items. So we have the same soul that powers each and every one of us, and they are channeled in different ways. One of them channels Shner, one of them channels Dan. So each one is channeling is giving life force to another person.
I was thinking there might be a distinction, what she was saying though, between like nefesh and neshama.
Okay,
So-
Rebecca, this is going way deeper than we have to. No, okay. So no.
It's the nefesh is and neshamas. It's in the Hebrew.
So this is a lot of Hasidic discourses. I want to. It's definitely beyond today's lesson, and maybe even the course, about different levels within souls, different parts of the soul.
So they're
But the general
part of the
umbrella
soul.
part of the soul is life force.
Okay.
There's nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida, deeper and deeper layers of a soul, but it's not important for this discussion. Definitely not connected to life and death, really. It's about how you live day-to-day life, maybe, but that's it. Sorry,
Are there
Joe.
good souls and bad souls?
No,
Can you make a judgment of the quality of a soul?
no.
But you said before that certain very righteous people, their
Have
souls
whole-
are different.
So they have holier souls. What I mean
Holier
by
soul.
that,
All right.
what I mean by that is that certain people live more soul-like lives. They live more spiritual lives. They're more in tune with their souls. Holier souls have the ability to, I guess, enable someone and help them live spiritual life. And actually, that's how we're going to conclude the lesson today, how we can live more spiritual. So we're going to get there in just a few minutes.
Just to add the question that goes along with it, the interrelationships between the soul and the body, are they completely separate? Do they relate to each other? Does one affect the other?
So so very good. So that's the next question. It seems to be that Judaism has a very flippant, nonchalant approach to death. A soul unaffected by birth, unaffected by death. It's just a moment in their journey of the existence of a soul that it passes through a body for God knows how many years. It seems to be a very depressing point of view for how we perceive death and life. You know, there are some religions, and sadly, we're seeing it now in Israel primarily, where certain religions are not, they glorify death. I actually remember reading the Radvaz, one of the famous scholars in the 16th century. He writes about this topic, where you have this. He observed the Muslim culture in that point in time. He was in Morocco, I believe, and he says that he sees that in Egypt and Morocco, where he resided, Muslims were not allowed to mourn. They didn't sit shiva, because what's the problem with death? Meaning it's a good thing. The soul is not trapped anymore, so it's good. They view death as a very positive thing. And yet, we see so many parts in Jewish life that without it, you can't even imagine Judaism and Jewish law, where you see the value of Jewish life, how much we value human life, how much we value so many things that need you to be alive to do. And when someone passes, all the details of how we commemorate a person's life and their death and everything. So which one is it? Is it that we don't care, that the soul is unaffected and it's worthless and it's not a very important part of life? Or is life actually important? Is this journey that we have in this world with our souls and body interconnected, is an important integral part? Or is it just a fleeting moment of the soul's journey? Well, you see both aspects in Judaism. It almost seems like a contradiction. Yeah.
There are a finite number of souls, because you seem to allude to that. Does that mean that possibly as souls go through their infinite life, that they gain experiences from different vessels?
And that actually affects our soul DNA. Very, very, very much so. That's going to be also a conversation regarding reincarnation, because we see that a person's life affects its soul, and that soul that eventually goes into someone else's life, that affects the next person's life. So that's also a conversation about reincarnation. So there's a part of the text about the medrash, about the soul's resistance, that we didn't finish, and it's a very important part. This is Hashem's response to the soul when he complains about going into a future drop. He doesn't want to go into this world. What does Hashem respond to him? Very important text, text 7. Bill, you want to read text 7?
I created the universe, one condition. If the Jews receive the Torah, will continue to exist. If, however, they do not accept, then you should not.
Wait, is that the same?
I think we might have skipped one.
Maybe. Sorry, can I borrow this for a second?
go ahead.
Sorry.
It's 7. You want 5?
No, you're right. No, sorry, it's text 10 in this one. My apologies. Text 10. No, I got it. This is an older version of the book. That's why I didn't have it. Text 10. Sorry.
Hopefully, which I am sending you is better for you than the one in which you have dwelt until now. I created you, because of this God. At that moment, God inserted the yes will.
So it's a very interesting paradox. Hashem says, sorry, you're going down. Literally. That's Hashem's response. Hashem forces a soul to go into a body. So we see this very, very interesting paradox where on the one hand, Torah speaks about the value of the human life, that we actually not are allowed to. You've been to previous courses about this topic. We've spoken and studied about the responsibility that we must desecrate every mitzvah in the book, 610 out of 613, just to save a human life. That's how important life is. Literally, Shabbat is non-existent when it's about saving a person's life. You can do the worst things in the book according to the Torah. If it's saving a human life, you do it. Not you're allowed to do it. You have to do it. I have friends who are part of the Hatzalah group, the Jewish ambulance volunteer group. They walk around all Shabbat. They're totally observant Jews, and they walk around with a cell phone and a radio the entire Shabbat. Why? Because maybe, just maybe, someone's going to call them, their hotline, to need the Hatzalah on Shabbat and on Yom Kippur. In like 770 Chabad World Headquarters, you see people suddenly in the middle of nowhere, you hear radios beeping, Hatzalah is needed, and you see a bunch of guys get up, run out of their seats with cell phones. That's on Yom Kippur in a very observant show. Why? Because the value we place on human life is number one. Number one. And then on the other hand, we say, it's not a big deal. Soul is unaffected. It's, birth doesn't want to come, but once it comes, it's here. Once a person passes away, it's right back to where it came from. So what is it? So this is a very nuanced and sophisticated perspective, but both of them are true, obviously. That's the short answer. But how are they both true? Is because now we have to go back to text 7, actually, the one that you read, Bill. Mark, you want to read? Sorry, no, you can finish eating. I'll wait for a different one. Yeah.
God created the universe.
You got it?
And I just, God created the universe on one condition. If the Jews receive the Torah, stipulated, you will continue to exist. If, however, they do not accept the Torah, it will mean I will return you to nothing.
So this is a very interesting perspective that you may not know about. And Rebecca, this touches a little bit about the world to come, about paradise in Jewish faith. Hashem created the paradise only because he wanted to entice us to live our lives in a very special way in this world. Hashem wanted us in this world. If he didn't need us humans sitting around the table, why would he create this physical world? Hashem has every lofty world out there. What does he need a physical world with some nasty people out there? For what? Why? Obviously, he wanted it for a reason. He wanted specifically human beings, not angels, human beings with all their flaws and errors, specifically in a physical world, making a physical world a kinder, a brighter, and better place. That's what Hashem wanted. That's literally, so much so, you look at text 7, that's what he's talking about, that there's a condition. If we live up to it, then good. If not, the world has no right to exist. He only created it because he wants us to make the world a better place. Paradise was an incentive, a reward, that if we study Torah and we do mitzvahs in this world, and we are good people in this world, as a reward, God grants us a special place, in paradise for us. Take, for example, probably a good example would be people, a boy and a girl date for a few years, right? And they finally get engaged to be married, and they set a date for the wedding. In the meantime, they start planning the wedding, the florist, all the vendors that they're dealing with, the photographer, the venue, right? They're dealing with it for a long, long time. And then a few days before the wedding, I know this happens primarily in the movies, but happens that the bride gets cold feet at the last moment, right? And how do you think the groom feels now about the caterer, about the photographer and the venue and the musicians? Resentful, okay. He doesn't even need them. They're clutter in his life. Get out of here. I don't even care about you. The only thing he cares about is his bride right now. He wants her to be able to not have cold feet anymore. The vendors just go away. Go away. You're just clutter in my life. That's the way it sounds extreme, but this is the way Hashem views us in this world. If we get cold feet with our relationship with God, Hashem was like, I don't care about the other worlds. I don't care about these are irrelevant. I want you. If you can't make this relationship work, then all these other worlds are worthless for me. They're simply worthless. They're clutter. They take up space. I don't want them in my life. I only want them because in order to make my relationship with you, us, people in this world, a special relationship, it's beautiful to have all the lofty and spiritual worlds with it. But if not, get them away. They're extra things. That's the way Kabbalah teaches our relationship with Hashem. Hashem specifically wanted us in this world. So it's a phenomenal paradox that on the one hand, the soul doesn't want to come. Understandably. Why should he want? Life is good. Up high, everything's good. But on the other hand, he knows that being a soul without an attachment to a body, Hashem doesn't want that. Hashem doesn't need that. Think he needs a bunch of souls? Think that's what Hashem went through all the creation of the world so that he should have a bunch of angels and souls sitting with a blissful life? No, that's not what Hashem wanted. Like imagine a groom is left with just a bunch of vendors. That's not what he wants. He wants it if it means that eventually there will be a soul and a body connected with him. So the soul-body relationship is on the one hand a very big distraction and a nuisance for the soul. But on the other hand, it's the biggest blessing because he can only do certain things. The ultimate purpose of making this world a good place by doing a mitzvah, by being in a body. A soul can do a mitzvah on its own. Very famous medrash is when Moses went to get the Torah. Angels were like, wait, where are you taking this Torah? It was ours the entire time. Where were you going with this? He says, Torah? Says Moses told the angels, open the Torah. I'll tell you it's not yours. It says, I took you out of Egypt. You were in Egypt. You were slaves in Egypt. It says, honor your father and your mother. You have a father, you have a mother. It says, you shall not steal. Stealing? What, in the spiritual world, stealing? These things don't apply to you. The Torah was created, essentially the entire world was created so that we can do a mitzvah in this world. A soul wishes it can do a mitzvah on its own. That way it can put a body on the side, but he knows, a soul knows at the end of the day, it needs a body. So it's a crucial relationship that a soul and body need each other. A body needs a soul because without it, it's a lifeless form of clay at the very best. And a soul needs a body because without it, it can't do what it's meant to do. That's the relationship between a body and a soul. So why is that important for our discussion? I'll tell you why. Because when you understand that life is a life that we're meant to live by being in this world and focusing on these things and making the world a better place, death is not something to be scared about because it's just a new phase of that life. It's another version of you. Right now, it's a version of you of body and soul. And soon enough, it'll be just so. It's a new phase in life. It's not afterlife. It's part of life. It's a part of our life. When you view it that way, there's no fear of death. And I want to read the story. I believe you have it in your books. In text of here's text 11. So I apologize. Let me just look quickly. It's a famous story of the Rebbe's father-in-law. No, it's not here. It is. No, it may not even be in there. No, it's not in there. So it's only in mine. I'll read it very quickly. This is when about how many years ago? About 100 years. 100 years ago? No. Yeah, about 100 years. 1929. 1927. Sorry, 1927. The sixth Rebbe of Chabad. He was arrested and incarcerated several times for spreading Judaism in the Soviet Union. And his crime was a very, very big crime. This is an account of one of the interrogations of the NKVD, the GPU. He writes his notes. I arrived for interrogation at the offices of the Soviet GPU. However, in keeping with my principles, I was not very cooperative. One of the interrogators raised a revolver, a gun, that sat on the desk before him. He looked me in the eye and mockingly said, This small toy has incredible powers. It causes principles to melt away. It opens mouths. Under its spell, even mutes have become talkative. And the Rebbe responds, I responded, you are quite mistaken. That toy only has an effect on faint-hearted non-believers, those with one world and multiple gods. We, on the other hand, have one God and two worlds. As such, I don't panic at the sight of your toy. It has no effect on me whatsoever. The Rebbe was basically saying that death doesn't scare him. Because if death means the real end of life, yeah, that's scary. That actually is scary. Come to think of it, right? As Yogi Berra said, that it ain't over till it's over, right? But by death, if that's the way you view life, then when someone passes away, it's over. Straight up, it's over. It's final. But if you view life the way we view life in Judaism, realizing that it's a phase of life, it's one of the phases of life, the phase that the soul and body are connected, then the soul lives on forever and ever. So now you move on to the next phase. Now, again, obviously easier said than done, right? It sounds all nice on paper, but practically, the anxiety of death always gets to us at some point or another, especially when we lose a loved one. It really hits close to home. But when we realize what death actually means in Judaism, no problem. When we realize what death actually means in Judaism, it gives it a whole new perspective on what is it? Thanatophobia? I can't even remember what that word was.
Thanatophobia.
What is it?
Thanatophobia.
Thanatophobia, okay. I want to just conclude with this, where it's not something that is just for when someone ends life. When someone's life in this world ends, life while we're living with a body and soul can also be eternal. How so? When we realize that when we're living our lives and we have the capacity, the ability to turn it into something holy, we are thereby making this moment an eternal moment. When we take a cup of water, a cup of seltzer, and you make a bracha, make a blessing on it, you elevate this cup of seltzer into something holy. So you're living your life as a holy being. And when you live your life in such a way, and you stop focusing on things that will have an end, some people focus on wealth and honor and many things that they have an expiry date. And instead you focus on things that last forever, on soul things, you have a totally different life, even when you're living life. Not just a good life when life in this physical body ends, but even when you're in this physical body, you have an eternal life because you're focused on eternal things. So that's a very important introduction to the entire concept of life/afterlife. Next week, what we're going to discuss, and again, this is going to take place the same time, same place, is we're going to talk about the experience of the soul's departure from the body and the aftermath from the soul's perspective, actually. The significance of someone's passing, the burial prep, burial, grave visitation, and all of that. And we're going to answer probably one of the most important questions that I assume many of you are thinking, if not have asked already, is once a person passes, what kind of relationship can a soul have with their loved ones after death? It's a very important question. And after next week's lesson, we're going to have a new understanding, a new perspective on our soul connection with those who pass away from this world. So I want to thank, I know a few of you already donated to this course. So thank you, Phoenix, for donating class 1 of this important course. And we're going to have a few people I know couldn't make it this week. Hopefully they'll be here next week. If not on Zoom, you're always welcome to join us on Zoom. I will be sending out a weekly email. I'm going to send out, if all of you got the email today, did everyone get the email? Okay, good. I want to share this one very important video that I'm going to share as a summary of this week's class. So also discuss the oxymorons, which I think is a fascinating. Has anyone ever heard of Rabbi Manis Friedman?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Rabbi Manis Friedman is all over YouTube. He
Yes.
looks very sagely, long white beard. Probably my favorite rabbi on YouTube. The reason is, and by the way, he's known as the YouTube rabbi by YouTube. YouTube gave him that title. His primary topics is the afterlife, soul and afterlife, and relationships. I know it sounds a little crazy. There's two: dating and marriage, and soul and afterlife. But he has some unbelievable classes, clips. He's very big. Rabbi Manis, Manis Friedman. Look him up anywhere on YouTube. You can't miss him. He has a long white beard and he speaks really eloquently, very, very beautiful. So I suggest you look him up because he has a lot of things to add on this topic. So we'll see you all next week, God willing. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. And we'll see you next week, God willing. Yeah, so I'm going to share it every week. I'm going to share this as a reminder in case people forget to put it in their calendar. We'll see you guys.